In the hot seat this evening, Mark Kalil, Global Markets at Standard Bank, and of course we've got David Shapiro from Sasfin still in studio with us. Mark, we're chatting about the Standard Bank Africa Index, and you've been around for 3 years in this game effectively. What is happening, and can we get excited? We were talking about the potential Africa story earlier. Can we get excited?
We like Africa. Shakira said it at the World Cup. It's time for Africa. We've launched this Pan-African Equity Index. It's 31 countries, 183 stocks, and we just believe that it gives access to the investor who previously couldn't access the illiquid markets in Africa. So if you look at Africa, for example, there's hardly any listed commodity stocks, hardly any. The composition of our index is 60% local listed shares, and yet 40% of it is international companies with exposure into commodities. So it's diversified, it's cost effective, and it gives you this liquidity vehicle.
Is this an index, or do you have a fund that emulates it?
This is an index that Standard Bank optimized in terms of market caps and liquidity and exposure to Africa. So it's not a fund, an actively managed fund. It's a passive index, and we believe that a lot of investors may actually benchmark to use it as the African index.
Because there is no African index benchmark, is there?
Yeah.
This would actually take the place of it.
Over the years, there have been very strong attempts from the Dow Jones 50 Africa Index, which is only like 11 countries, Lions Merrill Lynch Index, which included South Africa, MSCI Africa and S&P Africa have only got like 6 countries and 8 countries. So what we're selling is a very diversified index, broad representation. In
well, that's where I want to pause. David, I want to throw this at you. I mean, 31 countries, 183 stocks. I mean, surely if you believe in Africa,
yeah, but how
you can't
do you
ignore
access those stocks? You see, I go the other way. I'm telling everybody, if you want Africa, buy South African companies that are going into it. And that's why when Mark came in, I was quite excited. Hold on a sec. He has a fund in which we can actually participate in that. The big fear and the big worry for us is, well, how do we access those 183 odd stocks? You know, it's very hard to open up an account in Kenya or Ghana or wherever.
Well, is there a solution?
Yes, for the man on the street, the retail investor, we listed this index on the JSE last year, May. So we've got an ETN, an exchange-traded note, referencing the performance on the index.
I can't believe you don't know about this.
It's about marketing and selling Africa.
So you've got an ETN, an exchange-traded note for the man in the street.
Referencing the performance on the index. If you look at the active...
How do you hit yourself?
Standard Bank is market maker. We've got our trading hub out of London, which has just moved to Joburg for Africa. We've got, we set up KYC accounts with 50 different brokers into Africa. So we've got relationships, the trading platform, we can market make. And then on the institutional side, because we get the large flows on the large cap stocks, and obviously Africa is very concentrated, it's very easy for us to market make across on the smaller cap stocks.
I'm not allowed to trade, but my ears are picking up here. Are you going to look at this tomorrow?
No, absolutely. I think it's a very interesting area. You know, I read a comment that Africa over the next decade will contribute more to the global economy than Europe, okay? Not in absolute terms, but in terms of growth. In other words, imagine blowing air into a balloon, you know, because that's the world economy. So more air will come in from Africa in the next decade than Europe. Gives you an idea of the kind of growth we're anticipating.
Let's talk about your penetration. You say 31 countries and 183 different companies, effectively different stocks. Where do you have a bias? I mean, are you looking at a Nigerian bias, a Kenyan bias? What is going on here?
If you looked at the actively managed funds, like the Investex and Coronations, you'll find that essentially Nigeria probably makes up 40% of the constituents. We've got a country limit cap of 20%. So
per country,
per country,
to 20%.
So that's it. And we've got 5% cap per stock. And then we've got 15 stocks per country. So again, it's just to have this cap on and make it very diversified.
Mark, do you know the individual stocks? Have you got a familiarity with them?
I have got quite.
So what are your top 5 there? I mean, which companies should we be looking at?
Well, again, it's a passive index, but if you do look at the index constituents, Nigeria comes into play definitely with all the banks.
So UBA. United Bank of Africa.
GTB, UBA, Equity Bank, Zenith Bank.
So a big, would you say across the index, sorry to interrupt you, I know we're looking for more stocks and we'll come back to that. Is there a strong focus, a sector bias to the financial sector on the continent?
Across the index, the financial constituents is 36%. And if you look at the basic minerals and oil and gas, that makes up 40%. And yet those stocks aren't listed in Africa. That's where we get the exposure from the international play.
Where they're listed in AIM or in...
Toronto, Australia or London.
Okay.
When you look at Kenya, obviously Safaricom is one of the large constituents, and that probably makes up 5% of the index.
So you're taking international companies that are operating in Africa,
yes,
listed on AIM, listed on the Toronto, listed on the JSE, putting it into that index.
And the way we've done it is they've got at least 85% exposure to Africa in terms of profits, revenue or assets, and that links into your Reserve Bank ex-con circular of an African company by definition. So that when South Africans, for example, want to invest into Africa, it meets the offshore requirements.
What about marketing to the man in the street? My concern is that David Shapiro doesn't know about this. I can see he's very interested. You know, when he starts going, okay, then you know he's going to do something about it tomorrow.
That's where we use our Standard Bank marketing and investor relations team to market this.
Is there uptake?
There are fan outs, there's online share trading, that's where we offer the platform. The liquidity hasn't been as large for the institutional investors. For the retail investor, it's compelling and it's good. We do sell the dollar same index to investors and institutions, and that's privately placed and it's very large ticket size.
What's the size of the ETF?
The ETF, I think the minimum size is 10,000 Rand entry.
What's your market cap at the moment?
We could eventually issue up to about R1 billion. Okay. So we're working off our ETN platform on which we've got the commodity ETN as well. So the infrastructure's there. We're actually doing investment cases for a lot of pension funds in Africa and institutions. So it does target the wholesale and the retail market.
Crucial is your performance. You've outperformed the MSCI Africa Index, is that correct?
Yes.
Since inception?
For the last 3 years, since inception, correct. We picked the starting point as the end of the global crisis, just so that everybody could work off one point. And we're up 68% in dollars on a 3-year reference. The MSCI Africa, sorry, the MSCI Frontier Market Index, which makes up 31 frontier market countries, and for Africa is up 19%. But when you look at the comparable Africas, they're basically flat. And again, the commodity stories come through.
Oh yeah, I had a bad year in my commodity.
So when you look at commodities, the resource story, you're right. The IMF are looking for 7 of the top 10 fastest growing economies to come from Africa by 2015. We keep selling this commodity story.
We've just got one question that I have to ask.
Go ahead.
About Spur.
He's all yours. Of course. We thought we were going to go back to Spur.
Travels to Africa.
Have you seen Spur?
Can
How many
Spur
Spurs have you seen?
It looks like I've visited a lot of the franchises. Yes, we do like the consumer stocks. We just believe that disposable income for the African investor, I mean, Africa as a whole, including South Africa, it's only 2.4% of global GDP growth, and yet it's 12% of the world's population. So
that disposable income is going to be a challenge going forward.
NASPER said that I think within the next few years that's going to go from $1,000 to $5,000. You know, and that's why if you look at NASPER, you look at their whole policy of going into Africa with cheaper bouquets, you know, which as people get richer will start to expand and you know, spend more. And so if you look at the growing middle class, it's a very exciting area.
What consumer stocks do you feel would have traction across Africa?
Well, if I could just target like the multinationals, because you alluded to it earlier, but like South Africa penetration into that. ShopRite, look at the performance. You've said Spur. If we look at the multinationals, we look at Unilever, Guinness, Diageo, Total, Shell, the oil companies, all of them. So the penetration of multinationals into Africa, that's the growing economy. And there's so much cash holdings and a wealth of local capital seeking assets. And that's the story that we believe in. So I just believe that the capital markets, when you're targeting issuers, and IPOs and new products to market, like even ETFs. Eventually, you're just going to try and push the local markets.
David, are you convinced?
I like the story, sure. You know, I still try to sell it in a different way. You know, I still sell South African stocks that are expanding into Africa. And I've done very well on that one.
We won't argue with you. Mark will be keeping an eye on your product and hopefully get regular updates. Thanks very much for joining us. Mark Kalil, Global Markets at Standard Bank.